Hi, this is Dave Douglas. You're listening to the music of Charles Tolliver. This is a very special edition of the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. It's a conversation with Charles Tolliver on the occasion of him being given the award of recognition by the Festival of New Trumpet Music. It took place on September 10th, 2017 at the Glassbox Theater at the New School in New York. Also on board were Keyon Harrold, trumpeter, and Meghan Stabile, whose name you will hear me mispronounce at the live event. And she said it was okay. But now I've been corrected, and so I'm saying it right. Meghan Stabile. From Revive and myriad other projects and productions. Keyon Harrold, I'm sure you know his trumpet playing. I am a huge fan. I'm also a trumpet player myself. And we talked to Charles Tolliver about his music and his path, about self-determination for creative musical artists, and lots of other stuff. We laid in some of his music as a bed for the conversation, so we hope you enjoy it. All 40-some-odd episodes of the podcast can be found at greenleafmusic.com or at iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also send me a direct email message, podcast@greenleafmusic.com. Please do. This episode was edited by the great Jeff Countryman. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to Meghan and Keyon, and especially Charles Tolliver, for imparting so much wisdom in this conversation. Hope you all enjoy it. Have a wonderful day. Welcome, everybody, to the New School Glassbox Theater. We're here celebrating Charles Tolliver and his extraordinary music and his gift as a visionary for how to be an artist in today's world and how to be in control of your creative output and everything that you do. And so we're going to talk about all those issues. I'm sure you don't need me to read Charles Tolliver's bio for you, but I'll just mention if you're hearing this as a recording that there's a beautiful sculpted award for Charles sitting in front of us. It's made out of pieces of trumpet, and I'll try to post a picture of that. But we're also delighted to be talking today with Meghan Stabile, who is the president and CEO of Revive Music Group, among many, many other things. Hi, Meghan. Also, Keyon Harrold is here, who has brought 3 amazing Adams trumpets that are sitting on the table here, like an invitation. But Keyon is, as most of you probably know, an amazing player and also blazing a trail in the music itself and also in how you do it in 2017. It's a great, exemplary thing to see, Keyon.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Charles, welcome.
Thank you, Douglas.
Well, you can say Dave. It's okay.
Thank you, Dave.
And hi to everybody. So I have a few questions for people that are here, and we'll just keep moving through. But if at any point people have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll definitely leave time at the end for questions from the audience for anybody on the panel. But just to get us started, I thought I wanted to ask Charles, because he was among the first creative artists to start his own company and put out his own music, I was just curious, what was it in the environment? I guess this is the late 60s, early 70s when you started this company. And I mean, what was it about what was happening around you that made you decide to take the business into your own hands? And once you did that, what were some of the challenges for you and what were some of the opportunity, things that came along that wouldn't have happened otherwise?
Right. Well, first off, I wasn't thinking about taking the business in my own.
that.
I mean, it's a long story. To answer the first part of your question, I just didn't want to queue up anymore, for I mean, there was still Prestige and Keep News' label. What was it?
Oh, Orrin Keep News, the producer of it. I can't remember the name of the label off the top of my head.
But he, I mean, here in New York, and on the West Coast there was, Pacific Jazz, Ding Bong.
It was Prestige and
Yeah, Prestige.
Rivers.
Riverside was Orrin.
Yeah,
Right. One of the first one anyway. And then he went to Landmark and so on. So in 1968, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. So I went at my little pennies, and I said, okay, I've been playing these tunes. I need to put them down.
What you could do with pennies in those days.
Yeah, and so I called my heroes. I got on the phone. I called Herbie, and he said, "Where is it?" I called Ron Carter, and he said, "Where is it?" I'll be there. I called Joe Chambers because he and I have known each other since we were 18. So he was going to be the drummer on that, and of course Gary Bartz. And that record became known as Paper Man from one of the songs on it. So that actually was my first self-production thing. But it just so happened that at the time, the record producer for Polydor, London, he liked it. He liked me, and he said, "Okay, you got that. You want to put it out?" So it came out on Polydor. So I'm still not thinking DIY yet.
I was thinking DUI.
Right. I just wanted to make a good product with great guys, and
But essentially, if I could just cut in, I mean, it sounds like you produced that yourself.
I did.
Thinking, I'm doing this, and
Right.
then it ended up that Polydor.
Well, normally what would happen is to shop it to
shop
Keep
around.
News or
Right.
Wine Stock or some of the small label, but I didn't want to go there. And so that was my first really self-produced record. And then my great colleague, Stanley Cowell, when we finally was no longer playing with Max Roach, he said, "Look, man, let's do a record, and on our own." And we did that. And I'm still not thinking DIY. I'm thinking, okay, I knew we had something great, so
Music first.
yeah,
Just
must be
produce the music.
one of these guys, take this. But when I would get on the phone, it was like, "Oh yeah, it sounds good," but big band. I said, "Yeah, it's a big band. It's a big band around us, the small group, And I didn't want to hear nothing, So I'm gonna try and not take, because this is a long story, So there was a group of guys in Detroit, and they were already doing big time DIY. Kenny Cox and Charles Moore, a contemporary jazz quintet, they call themselves. And they were great friends with Stanley. And so we went through there and we did a concert, and they presented us and everything. And they said, "Hey man, you guys are doing recording. Why don't you become the Strata, the East Coast
Strata. They were called Strata in
exactly,
Detroit.
right?
So hence
But they were
Strata
not
East.
into recording. They were not into recording.
Live shows.
And I said, I said, the way we do it is we sell stock, and nonprofit. I'm not thinking business at all. I don't want to. I don't want to go there. But the name East interests me, and so that's how the name of the record label became Strata East, Strata-East. I'm still not thinking DIY.
But you were partners with Stanley Cowell.
Well, we were more than partners. We never had that. We never. We just was. Everything was there in our heads, and we'd say, "What about that? Boom, let's do it." And that boom bang.
Okay. Yeah.
And so now I'm sitting with this product, and I said, "Oh, okay, we got a name. I got a name here. You know what? Maybe we better go ahead and put this out." But as you know, Dave, in those years, the record industry was about 10 steps, whereas today you would have computer in the right software, boom. And so I said, okay. I went to Max, because he was.
Well, he had experience.
Well,
with his
yeah,
own
he
label,
wanted to
right?
do that debut thing,
Uh-huh.
And he said, boom, bam, boom, bam, boom. I said, well, okay, well, I got to physically see how it's done. So very quickly, when a record is done, you have to do the mastering, the lacquer. That's one company.
Right.
Then you get the test pressing, as the artist, and you listen to it. Okay, then if that's okay, then that goes to a metallurgy place. And they dump that in there, and they make the mother plates and blah, blah, blah. That's a whole nother company, right? And then that's sent to the presser. That's 3 companies, right?
Yeah.
But there's also, that means nothing without that jacket.
Right.
And I was to discover that the companies that were doing the jackets, they were the big people. They were the ones who control everything.
Because they received all the discs at the end of the process.
But you have a disc, with the labels on it, it means nothing if you don't have that jacket to go in the bin.
Right.
So that's, step number 4 or 5. And so, wow, do I really want to do this?
At this point, you're sounding a little more DIY, Charles.
Because the only thing that meant anything for me is that trumpet. I'm sure that, my prized man, young man. When he first came to, I'll just quickly say something about Keyon Harrold. He came to the new school. I saw him as very quiet and humble, sitting there with all the kids around and everything. And he said, well, I'm going to try, God Blake and the Jazz Messengers. And he came in that class, and I knew immediately that this was special. That's right. That's right. As far as I was concerned, he was the greatest young trumpet player I had heard.
Right, man.
Oh, man. Yeah. So that trumpet, I said, man, if I'm going to do this business, that's going to take me away from,
Right.
that. And I was never going to let that happen. So I said to Stan, if we do this, we do this, we do this. So we went through all those steps and we made that. Now, you can have a nice product and you can get the jacket company. The big one at that time was called Vulex and Globe. They controlled the industry. Without them, CBS, Columbia, it doesn't matter. Didn't matter. They controlled everything. And so we decided, okay, let's do that. But even if you get the record done, if it doesn't get played on the radio, because everything was based on, airplay, radio. And it just so happened that there was, Billy Taylor was in control of a station called WLIB, and they were, and there was another station, WRVR, and they were the two stations that was piping out the music to all the jazz fans here in the metropolitan area. And there was a disc jockey there. His name was Ed Williams. He really became really famous in our community. And my mother, God bless her, she would call that station and ask him to play my record, you know. And so he knew who I was. So I gave him the record, and I said, "Man, you know, Stanley and I just did that," and they laid on that record. And the rest was history, because, you know, it took off. And I said, okay, now I'm starting to think a little bit about, you know, the DIY. Okay, we had that one product. And, what happened was is that it influenced a lot of guys who should have had their own record as a leader, or for whatever reason it didn't happen. But the musician who actually helped us to make it a really bona fide record situation was Clifford Jordan, the great tenor saxophone player. Come to find out, he had already done what we were deciding to do. And he loved it, you know, that we really went on and did it. And so he brought his product, and then things started to move really quickly with a lot of people. And to fast forward, we went, you know, by the time we finished out, you know, dealing with, you know, the LPs, there was 60 of them. You know. Wow. And some of them became, you know, pretty iconic things, especially the Gil Scott-Heron went to America. And that's how that started. And again, you know, I wasn't thinking about being a record owner, and the way it was structured to make sure that I was never going to be a record label owner was that anybody who brought their product there, you know, they used our system to get it out, they always owned that product, and they were the major recipients of the money. And people thought we were crazy once they, you know, we started really going, and the name of the label started to be known, because they said, you know, you don't have these guys on the contract, you know. No, no, absolutely not. And but somehow it worked, you know.
That's kind of a visionary thing. That seems like that was probably the first company that ever did that.
Well, I wanted it to be, once I decided, okay, I'm going to do this, I wanted it to have what I called a condominium concept. Just like you own your own unit in a condominium.
Right.
You know, but it's something that, you know, it's records.
But I think maybe it takes an artist owner of a label like that to understand, appreciate how important that is and how valuable that is.
Right. And there's one thing that you said, Keyon, that I love that little saying that you dropped, you know, in the email, you know, where it takes a little, you know, so that one person is not, you know,
exactly.
loaded down.
If one person does a little bit, nobody has to do a lot.
Exactly. You talk about that, and that's interesting, because that was my motto, and the way it was going to work was that, okay, you guys, you went in your pocket to produce your product. Now, okay, every time you go somewhere and you play, you take your product there. You know, we don't have a department for promotion, you know, that goes out in the 10 markets and works your product. You are the product. And so that was
a lot of work for an artist. I mean, means taking the reins and being responsible for getting that music out there, doesn't it? Wow.
And again, I was never going to let anything take me away from playing that trumpet. So people would think, well, you know, this looks like some record operation is going well. And man, when do you have time to play the trumpet? I was never in the office. I was always playing on the road. I made sure of that, you because once you get locked into that, and things are going well, going to practice.
Yeah, man.
I wasn't going to have it. So that's basically it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. I want to bring Meghan in here and ask her, having heard about all the different companies it takes to make an LP in the late 60s, early 70s. Things are a little different now, I'd imagine. And, well, I can say firsthand, things are really different now. I think there's still a lot of companies, it's just they're not all involved in lacquer and manufacturing of things. Now it's all much more up in the cloud and cyber world. And so, Meghan, I was just going to ask you, in light of all that, well, the big question: how are things different for creative artists now? But also, more specifically, like the meaning and the importance of recorded music has changed a lot. The value of recorded music and how people get to it and what it means to have a quote-unquote a record out is really different. So how do you see that different now, and what are the most important aspects in that for emerging artists and their careers and their music?
Well, like we were talking about earlier, not a lot of people are listening to CDs anymore. I know when I get music from artists, it's all pretty much digital format, so that's changed a lot. But from, the time that I started with Blue Note, a lot has already changed, And even before, when I first got to New York and started working with independent artists, this was before blogs. This was before a lot of even online sites and different publications were talking about the kind of emerging jazz scene. So throughout time, you've seen independent artists have to kind of take things into their own hands. And my first artist that I managed was Chris Dave. And, he had a record in the works for a really long time. Our first thing was it kind of happened backwards, but we put him on tour. And that doesn't necessarily always happen for certain artists. Like, you can have a record out. You can, have a publicist. You can have, all the things set up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to tour. So even managers now have to do everything. They have to be the PR, they have to be the marketing, they have to be the promotion, they have to set up the shows. So
Update the website.
Yeah.
Clear out the email bin.
Not a lot of musicians understand that if they do have a manager, it's a lot's going to be on them, but they also have to step up and kind of educate themselves about the business they're in now.
And what about recordings for them? You said that with Chris Dave, the drummer, he didn't have a recording and you got him out on the road. What changed for him when that record did finally come out?
He actually still hasn't released a record, but he did put a mixtape out, which was I think it was about 1.5 years ago, 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's a special case. He had already kind of established a name way before, even he probably didn't even need to put a record out to be able to tour and do all those things. It's a special circumstance.
Interesting. So, like, for somebody just entering the business, for somebody early on who maybe has some side person work and is a composer and wants to get out there as a leader, like, how much is the recording the thing to aim for? Or is the business different enough now that it's not as important?
What do you mean?
Well, like if somebody came into your office and you really liked their music and they were a young musician who had some gigs but wanted to be a leader, like what percentage of your advice would be like, okay, let's get you a record deal, versus start your own label and make the records yourself, versus let's not even worry about a recording, let's think of it another way? I mean, seems like you're really smart in this part of it, so I need you to share some.
Yeah. I mean, All right, so I consult for a bunch of different artists, and I think some artists come to me because they want to get signed, but I don't necessarily sign everybody that comes through, and even if the music is amazing.
I guess maybe because you feel like it's not what they need for their career. Or
Exactly. So I wouldn't always suggest the label route for everyone. And that's a really long, drawn-out discussion as well. But a lot of artists, even if they're on a label, they're going to be independent. And because there's not always a system, even within a system, that's supportive now. Labels have their resources. They have, they're set up and equipped as best as they can be, but you still have to do a lot of the work. So I'll always help to co-curate and help musicians customize a plan and an agenda. Whether they want to release the music independently, there's a lot of steps to be had. Steps to be taken. Some musicians will put their music out on iTunes and call it a day. And to me, that's a waste of their recorded music. It takes time, it takes clarity. One thing I say is to be very clear. What do you really want? If you want to be a touring musician and you just want to have a really great career, performing and recording music, that's great. But there's many steps to be taken before that can happen.
Interesting. Yeah. Like the recording now is only one small part of the whole
It's a
picture.
tool and
Like
it's
a
a
business
promotional.
card.
But
It
that's
is.
different than what Charles,
Yeah,
the
I just-
story he was telling,
I'd
right?
just like to interject. It's very interesting because when I was coming up, the A&R guy was really, he was like what you were doing in a sense. He could make or break.
Powerful.
Very powerful. Blue Note, it was Ike Quebec when I was coming up. And before I got in, after that it was Duke Pearson who became the A&R guy. And they decide whether or not you are worthy enough or you're ready to have your first record date or be signed as an artist with a major independent label. And so it's a completely another
It's
ball
really
game.
different, yeah, because when I have a label and when people come to me and they say, can I talk to you in your A&R costume? And I'm like, it's an outmoded concept. I think, I'm not going to talk to an artist and say, okay, here's how you should make your record. These days, we expect people to come and have a vision for what they want to do. Like Meghan said, what are your goals and what do you want? And this recording is not going to be, you're going to put it out and then you're just going to go home and watch the dollars roll in,
Yeah, the best way to have skirted that when I was coming up would be somehow to hope that an Alfred Lyons would come out and hear you playing. And if he liked it, he'd say, sign him up,
I wish it was that easy.
Well, it was similar to that. When I moved to New York, it was still kind of like that you'd hope somebody would hear you play and, get a deal and, record with somebody. Hopefully somebody, pick you up and take you on tour or something. But even now, it's different now.
What year was that?
I moved to New York in 99.
Yeah. And the major jazz labels still were quote unquote signing people at that time. But also somebody could come out and hear you and go, boom, this is it. We're going to do it. And then you can't get them on the phone. 3 months go by, right? And I don't know if that probably never happened to you because you play trumpet really well.
No, I mean, it took a long time. For me, it's a seriously a slow burn for me. Musically, and when I first moved to New York, obviously Charles, my man, one of my champions, seriously, from when I first moved to New York City, was always telling me, keep pushing, take no prisoners, over and over again, take no prisoners. You know, one time I played a recording for Charles. He told me, you know what? That's cool, but take no prisoners. You've been too nice to him. Keep it going. But at that time, you know, you had the Crisscross, you had the Fresh Sounds, you know, labels like that. I did a record like that, but, you know, vision-wise, it wasn't anything that would, you know, for me, make an artistic statement that would last forever. It was just an idea to just record.
It's interesting. She was. You're talking, you know, about Chris Dave. You know, you're right, because Chris Dave, he doesn't really need a record.
Exactly.
Because he's established himself, you know, in a genre, you know, where he's top dog. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, Dave is still like touring and playing for the people who love your music is the most important thing. You know, I mean, for jazz, I mean, it's all about, you know, that connection. Now, of course, we've had some iconic guys who they made so much, you know, off of their records, you know, but, you know, the Columbia, they made, you know, a lot of money that way. And so you think that, well, they weren't interested so much to tour. But for me, I don't get off unless I'm playing for even the audience, you know.
Making those connections, making those connections.
Yeah.
So when Keyon, when you say Charles, I mean, I know what a hero Charles has been for you, but when you say that he pushed you to take no prisoners, what kinds of things? What did you take away from? What did you do?
I mean, honestly, you know, Charles is a visionary person, but you know, for me, it was more of a conceptual thing. All my lessons in New York, from all the people that I studied with, it wasn't somebody telling me how to play D7, telling me how to, you know, play tritone substitutions. It was, you know, how are you visualizing, you know, your sound? Like, what is that going to be like? Obviously, there's already been a Freddie, there's already been a Lee, there's already been that. You know, what is going to make you you? So conceptually, that's the way I speak with Charles. And in that, what I was doing, I was on track, but it was like, you know, keep pushing, you know. Take no prisoners. That's how it was.
So you would say that having the concept, having the artistic vision is really
absolutely your sound.
The main.
That's the ingredient. That's
the whole thing is your sound.
You know, that's the legacy. That's the, you know, that's the reason why there is a Clifford Brown, there is a Miles, there is a Kenny Dorham, there is a Freddie, there is a Woody. You know, they have a sound, they have a concept, they have a vision, they have a, you know, a voice that resonates. So I'm attracted to those kind of people. So hopefully, you know, at some point I'll be able to leave something like that.
Well, you're good now, man.
Oh, man.
You're good.
It's a process. It's a process.
Well, yeah, but yeah, I just want to observe, I guess, just that it's funny because we talk about all these iconic artists that way artistically a lot. How important those artists are to us in our understanding of the music and the world and what we learn from, what we study in order to move forward. But it sounds like you're also talking to them, you're talking about these visionaries in terms of self-determination, artistic, you know, career development, having that thing to say that's your own.
Right. They're marketing.
I'll interject one little thing. You can be playing really great, and I can use this example because this is what happened. When I was coming up, it was the two of us, you know, coming out together more or less. Woody Shaw and myself, right? Mm-hmm. But Alfred Lyons would not give us a record deal.
I always wondered about that.
And I think because he was shutting down and he wasn't going to make any more stars, and he was going to sell the company. But you have to make a decision as a player. Okay, you know I should be at least have one record, you know, on Blue Note, you know, that gets going. And I think that's where it really kicked in with me back in my brain, that I got, I'm going to have to do this. I see I'm going to, eventually
Necessity
I'm going to
to ingenuity, you gotta make it
I'm going to
happen.
have to do it.
Yeah.
It took 5 years later for Woody to get, the Columbia
He got his
situation.
Columbia deal,
And by
right.
that time, I was already head over heels, DI, wide. So I never looked
Impact.
back.
This is 1975, the big band record that you made.
Yeah.
Phew. Wow. But that's I felt the same way. I after leaving Horace Silver's band and coming back to New York from the road and not really.
I didn't know you played with.
Not playing well.
I didn't know
we
you
have that in
played.
common. But after leaving that, I came back and I just didn't have any work. I mean, I was playing weddings and bar mitzvahs and divorces and what. But
Is that a gig?
I felt like
Divorce?
yeah, you have to pick the repertoire very carefully at a divorce. I'll be watching you. No, we can't play that. So, no, what I was going to say was that I had the same feeling. Like if I want to play if I want to play the music that I want to play, I'm going to have to create the opportunities for myself.
Well, you certainly did.
But the vision, you're right. The vision of what that is comes first. You sort of develop a thing where you go, okay, I have an idea. I might still be searching, but I've got my foot on the path, and the only way I can continue down this path is to create that opening and that opportunity.
What year
to
was
do
it that you decided to really get it?
I left Horace in '87, and it wasn't until '93 that I got a deal with Black Saint Soul Note and put out my first record as a leader. So there were some years in the wilderness, wandering.
Are you familiar with JCOA?
Yes,
Okay, so JCOA started.
Jazz Composers Orchestra
Yes,
of America.
Mike Mantler and Carla Bley. And at first, they were the main distributor of our new fledgling
Yeah, great.
label.
Hmm. Yeah.
But, I just want to interject this. I didn't know that you had worked with Horace Silver. So you know how it was some nights with those melodies, man. They were so long, they could tire you out before you even had a chance to start the solo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it was a dream for me. I learned
Well, of
so
course,
much. I was
of
just,
course.
I just didn't even think, I was just thrilled to play Song for My Father 3 times a night, once every set. That was fine with me, because he played so great.
Yeah.
But
He's a national treasure.
But leaving that sideman thing, like we're talking about, it took some doing, it's funny that in thinking about this discussion, I jotted down a question like, okay, so how are things different now than they were at that time when you started? And now, after everything we're talking about, I sort of feel like maybe it's the same as it ever was. Like, is it different now? Or is the idea of having a vision as an artist and blazing that path the same as it ever was? And just the challenges are different.
I feel like it's that sacrifice that you just say, you know what, I'm gonna put it all out on the line, or you can stay in the back burner. I mean, like I said, for me, it's been a slow burn because I've worked with so many different people and so many levels, from Cirque du Soleil to Jay-Z to Maxwell to Charles Tolliver to Billy Harper to, whatever. But at some point, I've been a part and infused myself into those situations so long, and it's great. And I could do that for the rest of my life and make okay money, and that'd be all right. But at one point, though, I say, you know what, it's time for it to be Keyon Harrold. I finally, just now, really made the honest transition to that.
To being a leader and producing your own.
Yeah, I produce music for
Yeah.
a bunch of different people, but to just say, you know what, I'm gonna give it up, finally, and just, take a leap of faith is literally been the last 2 years.
Well, I was trying to implant that in you, man. From the start.
Absolutely. It took a long time, man. I'm slow steady. So, but, I feel like, it's the best thing I could possibly be doing right now. I can't say that I've never had the opportunity to work in certain situations, because I really have.
Yeah. Do you feel like having label support kind of changed things for you? Because we had this conversation about a year ago, and you were working on this record, and you weren't sure what or when or how.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I paid for it myself. It's not the kind of things where they sign me and oh my God, they have all control. No, I have control of my record through Sony Legacy and Mass Appeal. So did a deal that's not the conventional. Oh my God, I signed to so and so. Literally, it is a couple of pronged deal as to certain people will do certain things for me. Certain people will do the creative content. Certain people will market it. Certain people will, and I'll give them ideas, and they won't be able to, strong on me on what the vision is for myself.
You mean give them ideas in terms of promoting the music?
Yeah, marketing.
How to market it, exactly. And how to get the word out.
Because I'm not just gonna get up and play, 4/4 time swing all day long. That's not my thing. I believe in the collaboration of hip hop, R&B. It doesn't matter to me. It's good music versus bullshit to me. I want to be able to do it all, and I feel like certain music is marketed in a certain way, and I think my music needs to be marketed more mainstream as somebody like Future, versus because I feel like even though I'm not rapping, but I feel like the content that I have resonates with people in a certain way if they know where I am, if they can find me. So I have to figure out where those people are to find me who could appreciate it and create new fans for the art form.
Right.
Marketing, you hit on the right word there, because as you know, in 2007, before Bruce Longwall died, so he signed me, because, and the reason he did was it wasn't about money, because I didn't need to do that, but he, I was the last one up that he hadn't signed all those years.
Wow.
And I mean, he knew what, my own record operation strategies and everything like that. But I did it because for me it was like a full circle, and I wanted to see what kind of marketing they were going to do, actually.
Which label is this? What's the name of the?
Blue Note.
Back at Blue Note.
Yeah, in 2007.
Right.
Yeah. And so I did the first record, and boom, okay, so Grammy nominated and all that stuff, right? You on it.
Yeah, thank you, man. he gave me an opportunity, man.
I always call on you, And so, but they slept that record. They didn't market it, because there wasn't any interest to do that. Bruce Longwall wanted me to do it, but his marketing team and his promo department, their heads were somewhere else. So I mean, they have to work together if you're gonna blow a record out. I mean, if a record is Grammy nominated, especially at Blue Note, but there were two with it in that year, and so marketing Dave hasn't changed, at all. I mean, you still got to market,
Meghan, what do you think about that? I mean, obviously you have to market, but I think it's the way that it works has changed a lot, right?
Well, I think Keyon is a perfect example of what's kind of happening right now. I mean, you can do the traditional route and, have a label supporting you, but I still think that a lot of labels are working from a very basic standpoint. And that just might be because they don't have a lot of the resources and the time to develop artists. But I think...
When you say basic, you mean, what do you mean exactly?
Cookie cutter.
I see, like, do the same thing for every artist.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of resources, time,
to think creatively and,
Right. And
or they just don't have the concept of what's going on today. They feel like what worked, obviously time is so quick now. It's like Donald Trump Day. You don't know what the news is going to be in the next hour.
I'm not going to check my phone.
Exactly, because it's going to be different. But in music, it's the same way. Things have changed. You can't market, my album like you marketed, Winton in the 90s. You can't do that. It's a different day.
A lot of young people, are becoming the innovators and pioneering how just in general, how music is being promoted. You know, that's changing. I mean, when I work with clients, we sit down for hours and go through different creative ways and concepts, how to put out music. You know, it's not, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. You know, there's no one way anymore. And like I said, as an artist that's even signed, they're still independent in a way. It's still up to the artist to bring forth their own creativity and ideas beyond the music itself.
Yeah,
exactly. Or you will get the cookie cutter treatment.
Or you will get the cookie cutter treatment.
Yeah, people can't see how vigorously I'm agreeing with you over here, but I'm nodding my head furiously because it really, it's when you said Wild Wild West, you know, it's this time of opportunity for creative artists because there are all these new platforms that people haven't learned yet, and these new ways that your music is being heard and distributed that never existed in the past.
It's like choose your own adventure.
And in a way, maybe that is the thing that's different now. You know, like advertising means a very different thing now for an artist than it did, I'd imagine, if you took out ads in Downbeat in the set, you know, when you started your label.
I never took out an ad.
No, zero ads, no ads.
No, because we were playing artists and our product sold from us.
From the stage, from being wow.
You were the advertisement on stage.
Wow. So maybe
it's kind of like
figure it out.
I guess in the early '90s with Master P. Yeah. They were selling it out the trunk.
There you go.
100% profit. Can't be mad.
So Keyon, this legacy project, I see it all over the place. Maybe it's just where I go, but it's great to hear it and see it happening. How much is that support from the label, and how much is that your own initiative as an artist?
It really is a joint venture.
Uh-huh.
It really is both. You know, most of the stuff you see from the designs and everything like that, that's literally myself and my partner Andrea Pisciconi, and a lot of it. You know, sitting around and coming up with concepts and thinking, you know, let's try that, let's do that. That might work, that might not work. And you know, a lot of the label support is, you know, just the muscle behind it. You know, conceptually, it's like, this is what I'm thinking. Let's make that happen. So, you know, it's not somebody like, okay, try that. Nah.
But it's a lot of it is online. Right, on various platforms.
Absolutely,
but it's also
as many as possible.
But it's also linked in with when you make live appearances, when you're doing shows.
Right.
There's all this activity around the show and the recording. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that something that you're working with when you said you're talking about all those different avenues with your artists? This is what you mean.
Like, for example, with one of the artists I'm working with, so they're strictly independent. And we talk about how to release their record independently, but also say you don't have distribution. You have to set up distribution. It might not be a worldwide thing, so you know, you can actually do deals with labels overseas in Japan and Europe and Canada and license the record. You know, you can set up these things yourself. You know, so there's many different ways that you can release the music, you know, but if you're going to do it that way, you tend to have to also cover all the costs. You know, you have to build your team, you know, bring in the right PR person, bring in the right consultants. You know, I always say, if you're not with a label, you got to build a label around you. You know, and hopefully you have the right team of people and advisors that are gonna make sure you're making the right move. The thing that like breaks my heart the most is to see artists spend all their money, you know, 3-5 years on a record and put it out with no plan, and they wonder why nobody knows about it, or they can't tour, or you know. So being clear and talking to as many people as possible. You know, that's just my advice.
And setting clear goals and having clarity as to what your statement is, I suppose. Sounds like
Just
this.
anytime you go to anybody in this business and you're not clear, they're not going to be clear. I don't know what to do with you. You know, now, not all the time. You know, there are artists that you know, musically, you just know how good it is and what's possible, you know. There's still vision that needs to be encompassed in all of it.
Yeah, it works differently for everybody, doesn't it? Every artist. Okay, I want to just switch gears for just a moment and then we'll open the floor for people to ask questions if they have any. But I just want to come back to something that Charles said a while ago, that in starting his company and deciding to really do this and make the records, and you know, you said you turned around and there were 60 records in the catalog. The catalog is still alive and people are still listening to that music and buying it. And you said,
Did you know that the LP is coming back?
yeah.
It's
Big time.
alive.
Big time.
Wow. So you're selling LPs still? The back of the truck, or
It's like what she said.
What'd I say?
You know, you make licenses
Oh, yeah.
all over the
Yeah.
place.
no? What I was going to ask was, you said I didn't want the trumpet to take a back seat. That's my first love. I wanted to always maintain my freedom to have that be the main event in my life. So was that a struggle, or is it doing what you do, having, you know, this whole career talk that we're having, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to take the reins of everything. Do you have any thoughts about how you kept the trumpet number one in your life?
Great question.
That's a good question. I'll put it this way. Since I was 8 years old, I had this in my hands. And it was put in my hands by my grandmother. She loved me like all grandmothers do. She loved me to death. I mean, literally, you know. And she always told me, finish what you start. And I got that trumpet because I was sitting literally scatting blue jazz or Charlie Shavers or Dizzy Gillespie since I was about 5 years old. And I always wanted to put that on some instrument, and the trumpet was it. You know? And so there was no way, nothing was going to change me from doing that, because I had to finish that. You know, it's basically
Sounds like you didn't have a choice.
I had no choice.
So would you say sometimes you put the business in the back seat in order to keep the
Actually, to
trumpet?
tell you the truth, when I first started this DIY, had a little, remember those cardboard file cabinets you could put and have all that paperwork in there, right?
The contracts and licenses.
So I come off the road, open that thing, and look at it. And I said, oh, okay. I put that in a little briefcase with all my music, and I go off on the road. And in my hotel room, I go back. And when I get back, then I was there. And that went on for at least the first 5 or 6 years, you know, while things were jumping off all over the place. But again, Keyon, everybody doing a little bit makes it a lot easier for not just one person to be overloaded, you know. And so I was hoping that, you know, by just laying in there that way, that, you know, a little bit of help would come from here and there and everything.
Yeah.
You know.
Huh. That's really interesting.
Or that it would influence other musicians, which I guess it did. you know,
Yeah.
to do the thing, get in this field and you know, create
I feel
more.
like but also, you have to do a little bit of each part of it every day. Like you taking the paperwork with you on the road is like saying, okay, I'm going to keep the trumpet going and keep this music going and keep these live shows going and all the
Right.
traveling.
Right.
And yet I'm going to get to the hotel room and I'm also going to
Right.
look at these contracts and deal with this business.
Right.
It's a little bit every
But it
day.
was easy because, look, if I had decided, okay, this is interesting. Let me start to put some artists under contract. And we could have done that.
Mhm.
That would have completely switched me into a total business aspect, which is cool, you know, if you wanted to go there. But I'm a musician.
Mhm.
I'm a jazz musician, by the way, you know, not just a musician. And you have to live with this thing, man, every day in order to deliver something, you know. It's the most demanding of all instruments. And so, you know, and you know that thing.
It is definitely demanding.
So, I mean, I have to commend you on what you've done,
Oh, thank you.
you know, absolutely.
Well, I'm inspired by you. Yeah. Big footsteps.
And still you playing that trumpet.
Yeah. I had a little help. I had good teachers. But it's still a
What
lot
is it
of work.
about us, man, the trumpet players, man? I mean, they get that thing, man. It's just once it is, it's like,
It's it's daunting.
Well, it's also, I've heard people say that trumpet players are crazy because all the vibrations of playing the trumpet does something to your brain.
Between
No,
that
you know
or
what's,
the
you know
air.
what's daunting? I lived with a trumpet player for 5 years, and I had to learn how to
sorry.
sleep through chromatic scales and long tones. That's daunting.
It is, I do the same thing every day for several hours. And it's, it's just year after year. And that's what it takes to keep playing and keep having the sound. Like you said, the sound is like the number one element in everything. That you training your body to be able to pick that up and just like have that sound that you want to have, that you have in your inner ear. And my warm-up routine sounds terrible because it's really, anybody who studied with Laurie Frank or Carmine or, the exercises, it's not about
Not
sounding
pretty.
good. It's not pretty. It sounds awful. And I had a neighbor when I lived in Brooklyn who one of her rooms was right next to the room where I practiced, where I did my routine every day. And I ran into her in the bodega one day, and she said, I think it's so great that you travel all around the world playing this music, and you're all well known, and you're all, so great, and then you come home and you teach beginners every day. And I said, I don't have any students. She never looked at me the same way again.
That's good. That's a good one.
Yeah. So it is hard, but I think Charles, doing all that you've done and maintaining the trumpet, I think that is truly heroic. And it's one of the things, obviously, that we're celebrating today, aside from just the brilliance of the music, and also having set such a great example for all of us, but maintaining that discipline over the course of all these years is really an inspiration. So thank you for doing
appreciate
that.
that.
Yeah.